Hi, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Be the Teacher. In today's episode, we will be discussing one of the mini assignments that's a major part of your first marking period grade, creating a treatment for the story, The Chaser. Now, if you have not done so already, there are two things you should do before going any further in this particular episode. First, you'll want to pull out your story or go to my website and download it, and then, you'll want to read it. That's right, you can't do this assignment until you've read The Chaser. If that's not your thing, hopefully you visited my website, www.tanitajamesknows.com, and you've accessed the link to the audiobook that I created for you. That way you can, I guess I can read it for you. I've included a lot of great pictures into the audiobook that will hopefully entertain you and give you a little insight to the story as you listen. If you haven't noticed, the audiobook is only 7 minutes and 42 seconds long. If I were you, I would keep your story out and read along as you listen. And if you have enough time, why not go through the story twice? It will only make your assignment that much better. Next, you'll want to go back to an earlier lesson where we watched an episode of Be the Teacher on treatments and loglines. If you don't know how to write a treatment or a logline, that is the place to start. Although I will go into some detail here, I will not go into the specific details that I did during that particular episode of Be the Teacher. So, let's get started. By now, you've read The Chaser. You know what the story is all about. It's about a guy named Alan Austin who goes and visits an old man. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to give away too much of the story because you really do need to read it. Now, as you remember, a logline is a one-sentence summary of your script. It's the short blurb in TV Guide that tells you what a movie is about and helps you decide if you're interested in seeing it. And it's the grabber that excites your interest. Your logline answers the question, what is the story about? You always want to have one sentence ready so that if you have the opportunity to pitch your movie, so that you can deliver it concisely and as in little amount of time as possible. Remember, this was called the elevator pitch because it was believed that you should be able to run into someone in an elevator and pitch your movie before they get off at the next floor. Now, loglines are great, but as you know, I recommend writing them after you write the treatment. What's the treatment? Well, a pitch and a treatment are a compressed retelling of your story. For my class, I suggest exploring 9 questions and then answering those questions in about 10 to 15 sentences. I think 15 sentences is a great length for your treatment. Now, how do you build a treatment for this particular assignment? What do you do? Well, we know what our questions are, so let's go back to our story for a second. You see, the chaser is your inspiration. You can do whatever you want. You can add a new beginning to the story and have the story be the middle and then have an end. You can have the story be the beginning of your movie and you can continue that movie after Alan leaves the old man's place. The story could be just a brief moment in your movie. The sky's really the limit. Don't be afraid to take risks with this assignment. Have fun. Change anything you want about the story, where it's set, the time it's set in, the characters' names, even some of the situations. You can change the sex of the characters. What I want to do is I just want to be able to recognize the story's inspiration when I'm grading your assignment. Whatever the author, John Collier, was trying to teach the reader, you should try to include in your story, even if some of the situations and the characters have been changed. So, what lesson is he trying to get across to the reader? And how are you going to do that? Who is the character that is going to teach your lesson? What is the situation that's going to communicate that lesson to your reader? You might want to include situations that are somewhat similar to the ones in the story. How is the situation going to turn out? What is the climax of the movie going to be? Let's go into our treatment page so that you can see some of the questions you will answer and the order that you should answer them in. The first thing you may want to do is share who the main character of your story is going to be. Like I said, it doesn't have to start with the actual story itself. In fact, I believe it's somewhat difficult to create a treatment strictly from this story, not creating and adding any new information. Some of you may see it as easier, but I actually see it as more of a challenge. So you may want to think, is this story the beginning of your movie, or is there something that happens before that? So share the main character and the general setting, where most of the story will take place. Next, you want to share what's the opposing force to the character you introduced in the first part. What is getting in his or her way? Remember, that character is not necessarily an enemy to your man. We'll call him Alan because that's his name in the story. That character just has different goals, goals that are getting in the way of Alan's goals. So who is that person? And what is a little bit of the opposing force that that person is presenting? And finally, what is the problem that the character should overcome? If you're going with Alan, what is Alan going to have to fight throughout the course of the story? Again, play with the characters, changing name, age, occupation, gender. The sky's the limit. Next, what are some things that your character is going to do to achieve his or her goal? Remember, as the character achieves his goal, this is where we'll see the lesson being taught. For example, if the lesson is to appreciate what you have, maybe what the character is doing throughout the course of this particular story is going after money. He wants to be the richest person in the world. At the end of the movie, we'll learn that you should appreciate what you have when the character does or does not get all the money in the world. Hopefully he doesn't get all the money in the world because I need to get paid. Now, back to our story. You've shared the main problem of the story that the character is going to need to overcome, his or her goal that he or she has in mind. So what are some of the things that this character is going to do to reach that goal? Remember, each of these moments is going to get the character closer to or further away from his or her goal. Many movies have the character doing something that looks like he or she is getting close, but in the last minute it falls apart and the character needs to adjust. So what is the first thing that your character is going to do, and how is it going to go wrong? Next, you'll want to see the character adjust and try something different. The secret in a movie is that these moments in the middle should all be different. The character should never be trying the same thing over and over and over again. That would be boring. So try to pick something that is new and unique and different that the character did not try in the last scene. This too should go wrong. Even if the character gets close, there's always some sort of wrench that's thrown into the plan. Once again, the character will adjust and will come up with a new tactic. And this different tactic will also get the character closer to or further away from his goal. Maybe the story was part of the beginning, or maybe one of these moments in the middle is the story. Or maybe you've just taken inspiration from the story, and what I recognize are elements from the story and the theme. Again, I appreciate creativity, so don't be afraid to take risks. This section of the movie should be your longest section. Most sentences occur in the middle of the movie because it takes the most time to tell this part of your movie. And this is why I think it's difficult to do just a straight translation of the story. How do you stretch that short story over all of these different boxes? The middle here becomes somewhat monotonous, and it feels like Alan's trying the same thing over and over and over again. If you can find a way to make this interesting, I am more than willing to see your simple translation of the story. Now, let's move into the end of the story. The end of the story is where we share what the main character is doing to solve his or her problem. This is the expectation. At the end of the movie, when your character is either going to solve or not solve his or her problem, he or she comes up with a plan, an expectation. In your character's mind, they have a vision of what is going to happen, and you know what? It never goes right. Think about it. I call it the first kiss theory. You always imagine what your first kiss is going to be like, and it's never like that. If you haven't had your first kiss yet, please trust me on that one. So it's the same thing here. Your character will have some sort of expectation. I am going to do this to solve my problem. in the next box, we will see the actual outcome of the story. Does the main character solve the problem, and why or why not? A great example of these two moments would be in The Empire Strikes Back when Luke Skywalker goes to fight Darth Vader. When Luke Skywalker walks in, he imagines, I'm going to win and I'm going to beat Darth Vader. He never imagines that at the end of the battle, he's going to be left with one hand and he's going to find out who's his daddy. Okay, the last box shares the final outcome of the story. After the character solves or does not solve his or her problem, what does the final outcome look like? Again, what you want to do when you're developing a treatment is have a character go after a goal, have other characters get in that character's way, and through the attainment of the goal or the loss of that goal, we learn something, and the character in the story is somehow changed. Now, it's time to write your log line. You've got to ask yourself, who is the main character and what does he or she want? Who is the villain that is standing in the way of that main character, and what makes the story unique? Remember my phrase. I like to include the phrase, and complications arise when. For example, if we went back to Empire Strikes Back, we would say, Luke Skywalker, a young man from a galaxy far, far away, takes on an evil empire and its leader, Lord Vader. And complications arise when he realizes his connection to the Empire may be more disturbing than he ever imagined. You see how that works? I would write my treatment, and then I would reverse engineer my logline. And don't forget that great phrase, and complications arise. So that's it. If I were you, I would go back into your story, and I would begin to think, what is the theme? Who is my character that I'm going to use to teach that theme? And what is the conflict that is going to drive my story? Again, you can keep many of the events and characters very similar to the chaser. I am fine with that. And you can attempt to be creative if you would like. That would be great too. Remember, I think it will be easier if you try to add some aspects to your treatment, either by making this story the beginning and adding a new ending, or by creating scenes that happen before and after this story. At the end, all I'm looking for is that the story inspired you, and I'm able to see that story in your treatment. So, that's it. That's it for another episode of Be the Teacher. Keep this video open. And as you're writing your treatment, you may want to pause and play so that you can help yourself if you get stuck on any parts. All right, I'm excited to see what you create. And thanks for tuning in to another episode of Be the Teacher. I'll see you next time.